Kokichi warriors may fall, but Ball Monokuma warriors always rise. Welcome everybody. If you clicked on this, you probably already know the deal. My channel saw a bit of an attention boost several years ago when I made some Danganronpa videos, but a lot can change in several years. So here we are to rank all of your Danganronpa blorbos according to my tastes. Some laughs will be had, you'll probably get mad at me a couple of times, but stick it out. Trust that the truth will come to light. And if you don't agree, then that's also fine. Just, you know, be normal about it. God, look at all of these blorbos. That's so many to rank. Just makes you wish sometimes, you know, what if Kazutaka Kodaka made another cool game with other cool characters? Well, I've got some good news for you. This video is sponsored by Tribe 9. That's right, did you want more wild worlds helmed by Kazutaka Kodaka? Well, look no further because he's knocking it out of the park, quite literally once again with Ruika Matsuzaki and Masafumi Takeda in tow. This time for an extreme action RPG set in a cyberpunk future where going into extra innings may prove deadlier than you'd think. Courtesy of Akatsuki Games, Tribe 9 is a free-to-play console-quality outing hitting mobile phones and Steam on the 20th of February, coming off the heels of a successful anime and comic project in 2022. This game has a heck of a lot to offer, tons of colorful characters, an in-depth narrative, a slick and stylish 3D battle system, gorgeous pixel art, and plenty of strategy. You're put in the shoes of Yo Kuronaka, a stoically serious amnesiac who's faced with a dangerous new paradigm. What was once a bustling city that resolved its conflicts with extreme baseball, or XB, is now a bed of chaos where XG, a far more lethal form of conflict resolution, has taken hold. To make your way through this mysterious setting and its explosive story, you'll need to build characters, customize your party to your own unique playstyle, and get swinging in dynamic melee combat. Utilize perfect evasions to get the upper hand, deflect to find your opening, continue raising your tension gauge to gain unique buffs from your tension cards, and even step up to the plate with extreme baseball matches in do-or-die confrontations. I have to say, as a fan of neon colors, flashy cyberpunk visuals, and eclectically catchy music, Tribe 9 made a pretty striking first impression on me, and with the game that followed, it certainly didn't strike out. And if it's already got you wondering where to line up, you'll be happy to know your early interest comes with rewards of its own, like a limited character skin and starter supplies. If you're a fan of action RPG gameplay, excellently eccentric characters, or are even just excited to see what Mr. Kodaka's been cooking up, you should give Tribe 9 a download today. Available on iOS, Android, and Steam. QR code is on the screen, and links are available both in the video description and the pinned comment. Thank you once again to Tribe 9 for sponsoring this video, and now, on to the rankings. Alright, so let's take this from the top and explain our tiers real quick before we get going, just so you know what you're getting into. Because Danganronpa is a little wacky and a little crazy, so we gotta get a little wacky and crazy with our tiers too. First of all, at the top we have the Kuma, that is the threshold, we know who that's for. We have Legends Only, this is reserved for the best of the best characters, the ones that give me the nastiest brainworms. Characters for whom the mid weep at the throne of Peak. We have Great, is what it says on the tin, it basically just means that they're really, really good characters, but they're just not the best. We have Good for what they are, this means that I usually like them pretty alright, but they have one or two problems that keep them from being excellent. It's complicated, probably means they have more significant problems, but for one reason or another I do still like them. Done dirty, but I love you anyway. This is just a bias column basically. It can range from good characters to bad characters that have some significant problems that keep them from going higher, but I just love them, so they get special treatment. Had potential? This one is more of a I see the vision kind of thing. A lot of the time I don't really like these characters that much, but I see enough in them not to hate them. Mid is what it says on the tin. They're not great, they're not bad, they're just kinda there. Funny, sometimes you get a little giggle for me, and even if you have nothing else going for you, that counts. The Y tier, the kind of characters that just make me shrug my shoulders and go, I don't really get it. The IDK tier, this is usually going to be reserved for really minor characters that I have absolutely no opinion on whatsoever, or for characters from mangas and light novels that I either didn't read or don't really remember well enough to give them a concrete ranking. The Hell tier, I bet you can guess at least one person who belongs here. And the Hell is too good for you tier, this one is reserved for one special character. And without further ado, why don't we just go ahead and get right into it. So first of all, we've got Monokuma, who obviously goes in the Kuma tier. Monokuma is an iconic character for a lot of reasons. He's funny, but he's also menacing. He's got a cute mascot voice and excellent design. Literally, I don't think that Danganronpa as a franchise would have taken off nearly as much if Monokuma wasn't in it, which isn't to say that Danganronpa isn't interesting on its own merits, obviously, but making a cool monochromatic evil bear and then having him be voiced by Doraemon certainly helped boost the game's notoriety when it was first coming out. Honestly, if they hadn't gotten Nobuyo Oyama in that role, I don't even know if we'd have gotten sequels. He's just kind of the perfect microcosm of of Danganronpa as a series. He embodies its vibe wholly. He can get serious, he can get funny. He's a very flexible character, and I love him. Sit at the top, king. All right, next up, we have... This list is in a weird order. Ishida from Danganronpa 1. This is the alternative persona of Kiyotaka Ishimaru after... Oh yeah, spoilers for the entire Danganronpa series, by the way. Mondo Uwara dies, and he's grief-stricken, and he tries to take on some of Mondo's personality as his own. Ishida is gonna be our first Y character. Now let me explain before you get mad. I just don't really think his gimmick in the plot adds too much to it. I think that there was definitely things that could have been done with this, but ultimately there's so little there for me to actually grab onto that it just doesn't really make an impression. Also, he like dies immediately. So yeah, I don't really have that much of an opinion on Ishida. Next up, we have the first murderer from the first game, Leon Kuwata. I'm gonna put him in good for what they are. Leon isn't the type of character that makes an incredibly strong impression on me overall. I mean, he's got a fun personality. I think the way that his talent is explored is fun because it really plays into the themes of that first game of establishing the whole thing behind talent versus worth as an individual person and how that is commodified. He doesn't really want to play baseball, but he's really good at it, so that's all he's recognized for. It's pretty interesting. I also think his murder motive is, you know, simple and to the point, but also interesting and compelling, and his execution is arguably one of the best in the entire series, absolutely horrifying. Overall, while I wouldn't say that I think about Leon Kuwata all the time, I would say that when I do think about him, I'm like, yeah, solid. Okay, next up, we have an actual main character. Took long enough. We have Makoto Naegi, the protagonist of Danganronpa 1. We're gonna slide him all the way up to the Legends tier. Now, I know that this might be a little bit of a controversial one because a lot of people, for some reason, think that Naegi is a boring self-insert character. I couldn't disagree more. Obviously, I wouldn't say that Naegi is a super in-depth character that is just, oh, you know, leagues above in terms of intrigue. But the thing about Naegi, especially when it comes to Danganronpa 1, is that he's the perfect kind of character to play into its overall themes and tone. Everybody else around him is completely over the top and nonsensical. He's kind of the grounded, regular guy. And you might say to yourself, well, doesn't that make him boring? No, because he has one thing that they all lack. It's the one thing that makes him special in the story, and that is how gung-ho he is. Like, yes, it does become a little mimetically overstated in the future entries, but hope is the main theme of the first game. It is that willingness to go into the future and hope for a better one. To see all of this terrible shit happening in front of you and say, yeah, I think I can make it though. When everybody else in the school gives up, it is Naegi's persistence to chase after that future that makes it all worth it in the end, and it's ultimately what dismantles Junko. I also find it very compelling that he wants to see the best in everybody. Sure, he's a snarky little piece of shit in his mind sometimes, but overall he still tries to get along with everybody as best as possible. Even when it comes down to the wire and the mastermind is out and she's ready to go under that crusher, he's still like, hey, I don't really want you to die though. There are not many people you could say that about. I think it makes Naegi pretty cool. So there he sits. Okay, Mondo Uwata. I think this is another good for what they are. Uwata's whole narrative with his brother and his need to get strong and his overall weakness and guilt for killing his brother by accident is a pretty compelling one. I would say it's somewhat basic, but it still gets the job done. Also, his friendship with Ishimaru is fun. I always like a character who's a little foul-mouthed and rough on the outside, but actually has a bit of a tender inside. Other than that, I wouldn't say that there's a ton to get into about him that really pulls at my brain or anything, but like I said, good for what he is. Sakura Ogami. Alright, I think that this one is pretty clear-cut. Sakura is our first addition to Great. The fourth class trial in Danganronpa 1 is one of the first that made me really cry. There are a couple of narrative beats here and there that I think could be done differently. Danganronpa as a series valorizes teenagers giving their life for each other quite a bit, and I have some sort of complicated thoughts on that, but overall I still think that as a character, Sakura Ogami is a very admirable person who obviously cares a lot about the people that she knows. Her friendship with Asahina is really sweet. People are so mean to her, and overall I think she just deserves so much better. So, get your honorary seat, queen. You deserve it. Alright, first killer of the first game, Sayaka Maizono. That is another good for what they are, sitting right above Leon here. Overall, I think Maizono is a pretty well-rounded character. There's nothing about her that I would say is deeply compelling, but she fulfills her narrative purpose very well. She's set up very convincingly as a sort of traditional detective game assistant character, so her death is a little bit surprising. I mean, I've had plenty of people comment and say, actually, I wasn't surprised. Okay, good for you. Don't you feel so smart? But I mean, you know, she's cute, she's a little f***ed up, she uses a knife. And also, I can kind of relate to her struggles. There is a real pressure cooker of popularity where if you're not supremely relevant all the time, you kind of just feel like your entire existence is fading away. But then also at the same time, being under the scrutiny of the public eye makes you want to explode. So, you know, I understand her issues. If I were locked in a room with her, I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw her, but I would least appreciate the hustle. Yasuhiro Hagakure. I think he's going to gatekeep the top of good for what they are. And allow me to explain. I really like his arc in the first game of learning not to rely on his talent for everything, plays well into the themes of the series. He's, yeah, a little obnoxious, but he's also pretty funny. He gets quite a few laughs out of me throughout the game. And I don't know, I just kind of love the trope of messy slacker. He's like the big brother to everybody. Sure, he puts his foot in his mouth all the time, but that's just part of his charm, baby. Also, you know me, even though I'm not a huge fan of Danganronpa 3, I think his design in Danganronpa 3 is kinda great. That facial hair works really well on him. Solid. Okay. Mukuro Ikusaba, the 16th student. Watch out for her. Oh my god, this f***ing clip. This one is definitely a done dirty, but I love you anyway. Here's the thing about Mukuro. She's not exactly super prominent in Danganronpa 1, aside from the parts where she's disguised as her sister, so you only really get so much from her. Her free time events are pretty interesting. I think the things that she says about her background really lend a bit more intrigue to what's going on with her, and I honestly love that stuff. Also, Danganronpa If rules. Ryogo Narita nailed it. Every other canonical appearance of Mukuro, though, is a bit of a mixed bag. She's okay in Danganronpa 0, but they do lean a bit too far into the you-know-what, and in Danganronpa 3, they just lean full tilt into it. I really don't understand why they felt that it was necessary to make all of those groan-inducing incest jokes with her and Junko. If you really wanted to, you could look at this as evidence of actual abuse in the relationship, and I think that from a reader interpretation standpoint, that's more than fine, possibly even interesting. But I don't think that it can be denied that tonally, within the series itself, it's treated as little more than a Mukuro is a weirdo gag. And honestly, no, yeah, I just think that's pretty cringe. At her best, Mukuro is a character that I feel pretty deeply attached to, one that I feel a lot of sympathy for, one that I honestly see some of myself in some ways. But the worst traits of how her character is written means that I really can't see myself putting her any higher than this. Sorry, girl. Is what it is. Speaking of the Despair Sisters, up next is Junko Enoshima herself. I really don't think that there's anywhere else you can put her. I'm just gonna do it. She goes in the Legends tier, right above Naegi. Junko is an antagonist that I have said a lot about in my videos about Danganronpa, and pretty much my opinions of her haven't really changed. She's iconic for a reason. She's got a great design, her utilization in the plot is very fun. Honestly, the whole idea of a super intelligent, pathologically bored Gyaru taking over the world and annihilating it is really fun. But there's also a lot of hidden depth to her character, which I find the most fascinating when it is often left ambiguous. The ways that she twists and manipulates people, the whole other side to her with Ryoko Otanashi, her relationship with Yasuke Matsuda, the way that she sincerely loves her class, and that being the reason that she tortures them, and also the fact that she doesn't give a fuck about the Danganronpa 2 cast at all. All of that, really cool. Thematically, she's perfect. She's a doomer. She is the eternal pop queen of high school that never wants to leave it behind and never wants to grow as a person. She just wants the world to be static and miserable. Static in the sense that it never grows, miserable in the sense that it's always shocking. The idea of a character becoming so intelligent that they can literally predict everything around them to the point where everything is meaningless and only death excites them. I mean, yeah, it's pretty edgy, but it's the perfect kind of edgy. If you were the kind of girly pop making elfin lead AMVs in 2007, I think you got some Junko DNA in you. Sorry to say it. What can I say but peak? Okay, we're just gonna switch those around because I feel like it's kind of silly to do one before the other like that. Okay, first off, Chihiro Fujisaki. I think you probably already know where this one's gonna go. Chihiro is gonna go in It's Complicated. Now here's the thing. I don't think that Chihiro Fujisaki is a bad character. For the most part, I think they're relatively fine. Sweet, nice, meek. Those are not character traits that get on my nerves necessarily. They're a little basic, but it's whatever. However, I'm sure that, as you know, as a trans person, I have some complicated feelings about how their narrative is presented. Now I know there are going to be people that come out of the woodworks to say, but Chihiro isn't a trans character. That's not what their arc is about. And here's the thing. I get that. I understand that. I just think that the way that their narrative is presented still contains some weird transphobic tropes in both its presentation and the ways that the characters react to it. And overall, I'm just never gonna be completely cool with that. You don't have to debate me on this one, I promise. The character will remain. I'm not taking this away from you. I'm just saying that for me, it doesn't entirely work. I see the seeds, but they don't fully pan out. Ironically enough, Alter Ego goes a bit higher in good for what they are. Alter Ego arguably has a bit more of a narrative presence than Chihiro, obviously not doing much aside from just kind of being a plot device, but I still think the whole discussion revolving around the sentience of Alter Ego, their friendship with the rest of the cast, all that kind of stuff, is still pretty neat. Also, aesthetically, they're just kind of cool. I like computer people. Fictional ones though, ChatGPT, stay away from me. Yeah, not much more to say than that. Again, the list order is just so weird here. We have Daya Owada, Mondo Owada's brother. Yeah, I think this kind of just goes at the top of IDK. I mean, sure, he works as part of the backstory that he's made for, but that is literally the only glimpse we get of him. He is an accessory to somebody else's story. He doesn't really have one of his own, so boop. Santa Shikiba. I don't know. I really don't have anything to say about Santa Shikiba. I think he's funny. The little anime princess that Yamada likes. Can't even remember her name, to be honest with you. Once again, IDK. Makoto Naigi's parents. I don't know, man. They're really giving me some funny ones here. Okay, finally, a real character. Aoi Asahina. I would probably put Asahina in great, just below Sakura. Actually, no, you know what? I'm gonna put her slightly higher than Sakura. I honestly just think that she's a really fun presence in the game. She makes every interaction that she's a part of a little bit more fun. People get mad at her for Case 4. Honestly, I think the direction for her character is pretty compelling. Makes it all the more tragic. Her talent's fun. Her donut quirk reminds me of Maya Fey, and that can never be a bad thing. Yeah, I love Asahina. Byakuya Togami. With much reluctance, they put you in great. Here's the thing. Togami is a prick. He gets on my nerves. But that's exactly what he's supposed to do when he's first introduced. And overall, I think his transformation over the course of DR1 is pretty interesting. I mean, sure, he does some things that really don't sit quite right with me, but I mean, you know, that's just how the prick characters kind of go. I like that he presents himself as the smartest motherfucker in the room and can never actually make an argument for himself. I love that he literally doesn't understand why people would be nice to each other. But overall, I think where his character goes by the end of the first game is pretty cool. He never quite stops being a prickly prick, but he finds his niche. And overall, I think that's more compelling than if he had just been turned into a super good guy. He retains his personality. It's what makes him him, being a jerk and having a lot of money. Also, his backstory is pretty fucked up. Celestia Ludenberg. I think if you've seen my videos and you know me, you kinda already know where this is going. That's right, done dirty, but I love you anyway. The thing about Celeste is, looking at it objectively, I don't think she's like a masterpiece of a character or anything. She's got a fun aesthetic, a fun talent, her personality is entertaining, I really like her design a lot, and her free time events and the insight into the behind the scenes of her character are things that I honestly find very endearing. Also, yes, there is the inherent bias of the fact that I had a huge crush on her when I got into the series when I was in high school. I made that everybody's problem. But, being realistic here, her utilization in the plot is kinda whatever. She comes across as this super intelligent, calculating character, and then when we actually get to her murder in Case 3, it's really dumb. Like, she makes a lot of amateur mistakes. Stuff that just overall makes the case worse. And yeah, that's not great. Thus the done dirty. I will say though, the end of that chapter, and especially the execution, are pitch perfect irony. The kind of stuff that just makes me smile and go, ah, Monokuma, you piece of shit. She fits the Danganronpa brand. I love her to pieces, but peak she is not. Kyoko Kirigiri. Kirigiri goes above Naegi in the Legends tier. Oh my god, what can I say about Kirigiri? In some ways, Kirigiri is kind of the main character of the first game. Her whole thing with her dad, her talent, her learning to open up to other people, it's genuinely really interesting. The ways that she advances from that point are also really cool and admirable. Yeah, she's got the whole kudere thing going on, and some people find that boring. I personally find it endearing. Also, her design is just snazzy as f***. Like, what? That coat? Those gloves? Are you kidding me? Nobody can look at this woman and say that she is not cool as hell. I will not allow it. If you just said it to yourself to be a contrarian, I am directly firing a missile at your house right now. Not many people can say that they opened a present and saw their dad's skeleton in it. Can you? If you can, I'm sorry. I love Kirigiri. Toko Fukawa. Ooh, I'm gonna catch some flack for this one. Fukawa is great. Yeah, I know that that's not exactly the most popular opinion these days. Kinda surprising because when I got into the series back during the fan translation days, people loved Fukawa. But nowadays, she's definitely not at the peak of her popularity anymore. A lot of people find her really annoying. A lot of people really don't like her because, you know, she's mean, she's antisocial, she says some kind of cringe shit, especially to Asahina. But despite all of that, I find her very compelling. I think her backstory is honestly really interesting in a very sad way. There there are a lot of things that you can extrapolate out of the information that we know about her. Sure, she is used for comedic reasons more than I'd like sometimes, but overall, I still think that she's really solid. She also has the thing that I really like about Togami, where she starts off with sort of a sour disposition, and even though she does grow as a character and gets closer to other people, she still doesn't lose that aspect of her personality. She is still who she is, ultimately. Obviously, she becomes a little bit warmer by the time of Ultra Despair Girls, but I still think that that's a very natural progression. Also, forgive me for Hime Joshiing out. I don't know, there's just a lot that I really like about Fukawa, so fight me. And speaking of Fukawa, we also have her headmate, Genocider Sho. Genocider Sho is complicated. Because here's the thing, Sho is endlessly entertaining. She's really funny, I like her goofy tongue, I like her special scissors. Her UDG design in particular is so fun. Nerdy high school bookworm by way of wolf that will tear you to pieces. Can I get a bloodbath fever in the chat? But there is a big asterisk next to her. A big old elephant in the room. And that is that she has really bad DID rep. That is not exactly unique to Danganronpa. It's not exactly unique to mystery visual novels either, though some do this subject better than others. I would say that Danganronpa is on the end of ones that do it pretty badly. I mean, you can't get much more typical than this. She is a literal crazy serial killer alter. Obviously, I don't think I should need to go into the fact that DID and other similar dissociative disorders are stigmatized to the point of being demonized quite frequently, and the way that it is popularly depicted in pieces of media like Danganronpa is a big contributing factor to the ways that people maliciously misunderstand people who have these actual conditions in real life. And overall, I think any character that continues to perpetuate that stereotype is doing a bad thing. That being said, I say it's complicated not just because I find her entertaining, but also because I find the ways that she subverts that trope also slightly interesting. Obviously, they introduce her into the story with the intention of making you think, oh my god, there's a crazy serial killer loose. She's definitely gonna kill somebody at some point. And then not only does she not do that, but she actually contributes some of the most important information to the main characters in the game that ends up making a world of difference. She actually kind of comes out as the MVP of the last trial in some ways, which I think is really fun. But overall, there's still no denying that she is rooted in a harmful trope, so it's complicated. Hifumi Yamada. Yamada goes in funny. Listen, I know he's kind of the pervert trope character of DR1. That part of him is not what I'm saying is funny. That's kind of the part that drags him down so low, obviously. But I can't entirely hate a guy that is voiced by Kappe Yamaguchi and makes niche anime references. It saddens me quite intensely that there are quite a few of his references that I recognize. So there you go, with great reluctance. Kiyotake Ishimaru. Some people are going to be really mad at me for this one. He's mid. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate Ishimaru. I don't think he's a bad character or anything. I know that there are a lot of people who really like his backstory, for example. But honestly, Ishimaru doesn't really do anything for me aside from have a cool character design. That's pretty much it. I think he's funny sometimes. And like I said earlier, his friendship with Iwata is fun. The part where he's like screaming and crying and begging Monokuma not to take him away is also like, it gets me. But not any more than like the average sad thing in most Danganronpa games. Overall, he just kind of struggles to break the threshold of relevance. I've never really understood the hype. Sorry. Monami. You also go in mid. Monami is fine. I just really wish that she, like, you know, contributed more before chapter 5. Like, don't get me wrong, I know that she fights the mono beasts, but that's off screen, and the minigame that contains that sucks. Other than that, she just kind of sits around and is like, oh, I wish Monokuma would stop killing people. Yeah, me too, you're not special. The thing preventing her from sliding lower, though, is her speech in chapter 5. I think it's pretty sweet. It actually got a couple tears out of my eyes. Yeah, she's fine. Ibuki Miyoda is gonna slide right behind Hagakure in Good for What They Are. I like Ibuki a lot. Her high energy, her hot topic ass aesthetic, the fact that she is literally a K-own character, and the fact that she is a Maximum the Hormone head. Girl, you get me. We are kin. Plot utilization-wise, though, she's just kind of fine. She's basically there to be the lighthearted comedic character who dies to signal the tone shift. It's kind of what happens to a lot of characters like her in Danganronpa, which is fine. She serves her purpose perfectly well. I would say that I have a little bit of a bias for her, but overall, she's pretty good, and I think that's a generous assessment. Mahiru Koizumi. Koizumi is also one that I would say is good for what they are. Not quite as good as Ibuki, but still there. Again, I kind of spoke on this in my DR2 video back in the day, but I honestly think that if you actually take the time to go through her free time events, Koizumi is a relatively likable character. Sure, the whole misandry joke is a little overdone, though not as overdone as another character who does this, but it's kind of whatever. I don't know, there's just a simplistic charm to her character that I really vibe with. Also, I really like her design. I would wear that fit in a heartbeat. So here she sits. Oh boy, Mikan Sumiki. Oh, Mikan. You were done dirty, but I love you anyway. The thing about Mikan is the thing that I think should be obvious about Mikan. The fact that she is ostensibly a victim of abuse, and also a lot of that abuse being sexually objectifying in nature. And you know what the game does? It sexually objectifies her. Can't say that I'm a fan of it. I think that there are a lot of things about her narrative which are very compelling. Obviously, there are a lot of people who really saw themselves in her, both due to her issues and the fact that she's pretty much evidently bisexual. That's pretty cool. But yeah, SDR2 spends way too much time treating her like shit instead of focusing on the things that would have been really interesting about her. I wanted to know more about her personality. I could have done with way less of the centerfold CGs. Nagito Komaeda. Henceforth referred to as Komaeda. I'm not ever calling that guy Nagito. We don't know each other like that. I mean, does it even really need to be said? Legends only, baby. Oh, Komaeda is such an interesting character. You know that he's one of the most interesting characters in Danganronpa because he's also one of the ones that is the most heavily misunderstood. His worldview is so... all of his little speeches about talent, about worthiness, and how that reflects back onto himself and his own experiences. The way that he genuinely isn't being sarcastic or snarky about any of it, but sincerely means and believes all of it. The way that he loves people that he perceives to be better than himself because of how much he hates himself, but then also turns that scorn and that cynicism onto other people when he thinks that they're unworthy. It is such an interesting push and pull. Komaeda is the kind of character who shakes up the plot like basically no other. He is there to cause problems on purpose, but when he does, you know that some cool shit is about to go down. Kodaka was so right for saying that his and Hinata's relationship was like Batman and the Joker, because when they clash, it becomes everybody's problem, and it's also kind of homoerotic. Guy cut off his own hand and put another person's hand there. Nagito Komaeda, you will always be famous. Sonya Nevermind. I have almost absolutely nothing to say about Sonya Nevermind. She's cute. I think that her liking horror movies and slashers is kind of a cute character trait. She has a couple lines that make me laugh. Other than that, she's just kind of there. Moving on. The Imposter. What, were you expecting an Among Us joke? It's 2025. We have to move on. The Imposter is good for what they are. I think the way that they play with your expectations in Chapter 1 of SDR2 is really cool. The sort of nice guy spin that they give Togami is honestly really enjoyable. I was actually a little disappointed when I found out that it wasn't really Togami because I was like, that would have been nice. I mean, maybe not the being murdered under a table part, but the being nicer part would have been cool. Ultimately, I don't really have a ton else to say about them other than genderless icon. Yeah, big ups. Teru Teru. Hell. Here's the thing. Teru Teru Hanamura, narratively, serves a perfectly fine purpose. I would honestly venture to say that some of the things that they do with his backstory and his motives, the whole thing where he didn't even mean to kill Togami and actually meant to kill Komaeda instead, but also still has self-interest at heart and wants to get back to his mom, all of that is perfectly serviceable. Dare I even say good, but the pervert humor. The pervert humor is so intolerably bad. And here's the thing, I'm a bit of an anime old head. I have experienced my fair share of pervert anime humor over the years. For the most part, I can kind of block it out. Doesn't mean I like it, but it kind of just fades into the background. Trying to drug Hinata in one of his free time events though, it's kind of the line where that stops being possible. You might even think that I would think it was cool that he's bisexual, and normally, yeah, I like rep. But here's the thing, characterizing your bisexual character as weird, handsy, and promiscuous, and also as being predatory to people, is to me not exactly the diversity win that you're looking for. So yeah, straight to the pit. I have no regrets. No, come on, you can't be serious. You can't put Izuru Kamakura here before I've ranked Hajime Hinata. Why is he all the way over here? Come on, get over here, man. We're gonna rank you first. Unlike Hope's Peak Academy, I actually care about you, man. Oh, Hajime Hinata, you go right to the top, baby. You take that throne, man, you deserve something. I love Hinata. He's my favorite protagonist in the entire series. Is he a snarky little shit? Absolutely. Does he have deeply relatable neuroses to me? Oh, like you wouldn't believe. Everything that he goes through is just so tremendously traumatizing and f***ed up, but like in a way that is so reminiscent of how schools fail kids. A system that just shoves you into the grinder, one that just wants you to become a cog in the machine and nothing else. Even if you have to suffer for it, even if you have to lose everything about yourself for it, even if you literally cannot hold on to a shred of your own individuality, because your individuality doesn't matter. What matters is what you can do, not who you are. And that struggle is Hinata's character totally embodied for me. I mean, obviously, there is the fact that he's just funny, charismatic. I like the guy. He has a lot of good scenes. Also, he's voiced by Detective Conan, come on! Also, he's voiced by Johnny Young Bosch too, come on! There's really not anything bad that I can say about him. He's just probably one of my favorite Danganronpa characters ever. There you go. Okay, now we can talk about Izuru Kamakura. Izuru Kamakura also goes to Legends. Precisely for the reason that Hinata is here, just as kind of the inverse. He represents everything about the cruelty and coldness of Hope's Peak, all of the reasons why they fell apart. The literal Gajinka of institutional problems. The fact that he's just so completely devoid is horrifying, but in a really compelling way. He also makes a really good foil to Junko for that reason. And I wish the ways that they sort of feed off each other and yet also kind of despise each other were explored a little more deeply, though I've seen some really killer fanfic out there about it. Actual Izuru Kamakura, the original guy, who cares? He's not a character, he just exists. Yes.
The 4 dark devas of destruction.
They're funny, little hamster guys. All right, Chiaki Nanami, let's go. I'm kidding. A lot of people think that I hate Nanami for some reason. That's not true. Obviously, the topic is a little nuanced, but we'll get to it. You may notice that further down this list, there's another Nanami. And before you get mad at me, they are literally separate characters. That's not me trying to be cheeky. They literally are separate characters. And because of that, I do think it is worth ranking them separately. So let's talk about what I think about Nanami and SDR2. Nanami is gonna go at the top of good for what they are. And let me explain. I think she's perfectly serviceable for what she's there for. Sure, she's a bit of a mascot moe bait type character. Oh, wouldn't you like it if you too knew a girl that played video games? Wouldn't it be so cool if instead of your wife telling you to do the dishes, she was playing Game Boy? I mean, you know, she's fun. Her role as assistant detective I don't think is quite as strong as Kirigiri's in that role, but I still think that she's nice to have around. I think the sort of trio dynamic that she makes up with Hinata and Komaeda is also really interesting. It's different than the first game for that reason, and I think it lends something unique to DR2's voice as a game, so to speak. One of the main reasons that she goes as high as she does, though, is because I really do think that everything in Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 involving her in SDR2 is very strong. I mean, sure, I'm personally of the belief that she's a tiny bit flat before that point. Not bad, just not super great. And overall, that makes the sudden attachment that everybody feels to her feel a little bit hollow, at least to me, but it still works in that moment for what it is. Her speech in Chapter 6, as I've gone over before, really hit me at a sensitive and difficult time in my life, and yeah, it really got to me. That speech never fails to put a few tears in my eyes every time I hear it. And for that reason, I'm always gonna have a little bit of fondness for Chiaki Nanami, even though I think that she does have some narrative issues. She's not the best of the best, but she's also far from bad. So, take your rightful spot. You've earned it. Teruteru's mom, I don't care. Akane Owari. Look alive, girl, you're the first one to go into Had Potential. I like Owari. I think that her energy is a lot of fun. She's basically Goku. But other than that, I don't know, I feel like she doesn't really have a whole lot going on. Most of her compelling material in the game is her relationship with Nidai, and honestly, I would say that that's a thread that prioritizes the intrigue of Nidai more than it does Owari herself. Also, I think you could have done some interesting things with her backstory. What they actually do with it is kind of cringe and objectifying and bad. I don't know. I don't have particularly strong feelings about Owari myself, that's why she's going into Had Potential rather than Done Dirty But I Love You Anyway, but there's no denying that I think she was done a little dirty. Sad to say it, but it's true. Kazuichi Soda. Speaking of Done Dirty, here's the thing about Soda. I really like his talent. I really like his design a lot. Also, he contributes to the plot pretty decently. I feel like people kind of forget about that. But the simping is pretty bad. It's not as bad as somebody like Teruteru, but it's still pretty bad. I wish the whole resolution between him and Sonia from the original script was a little more clear in the English one. We could sit here all day and talk about how the English script for SDR2 was kind of a rush job and not very good. But all I'll really say about that now is it definitely dragged Soda down several places for most people in the collective Danganronpa conversation, at least in the English-speaking fandom. And I find that quite regrettable, because I feel like when he's not putting his foot in his mouth, I quite like Soda. It's just that, you know, that foot is up there pretty often. Nekomaru Nidai. I don't know why I said it like that. It's like I'm introducing him as a game show host.
And hailing all the way from Jabberwock Island, it's Nekomaru Nidai.
Good for what he is. Nidai is a character that has a really cool standout chapter, which makes him really, really likable, really, really fast, Everything before that is just kind of boilerplate. I don't know, he's the funny guy that says he has to a lot. I do really like his positive demeanor though. I like that he's the kind of guy who will encourage you with his manly spirit, but you know, not in a toxic way. He's just there to make you the best version of you, bro. And I can appreciate that. Like I said, everything in chapter 4 of SDR2 is what really elevates him, and I think that stuff is really, really cool. His whole thing with Gundam is like probably one of the best and most intriguing plot threads in that game, but other than that, he's fine. Peko Peko, similarly, I would say, is gonna be in a good for what they are position. I'm trying to decide where. Put her like right between Ibuki and Koizumi. Again, this is one of those things that kind of comes down to backstory that carries a character. I think her whole thing with Kuzuryu is really interesting and heartbreaking. Also, she's got a cool as hell design, and she's voiced by Sailor Moon and Misato. She has a sword that she climbs on the hilt of. Her plan is honestly pretty cool. Also, I just really like Chapter 2 of SDR2 in general. The whole vibe of it is immaculate. Yeah, I like Peko quite a bit. Other than the things I just talked about though, there's not really a whole lot else that I have to say about her. She made me cry, so she can be here. Okay, speaking of which, we've got Fuyuhiko Kuzuryu. Kuzuryu will go into that good old great tier. Kuzuryu is a character whose growth I really, really like. He is absolutely the little jerk-ass with a heart of gold, and I love it. He has some of the best lines in the game. Also, his voice performance in both languages is mwah, chef's kiss. I really like the gimmick of a baby-faced Yakuza. That's funny. The eye patch, it's cool. But overall, it really does just come down to his character arc, which I think is really, really solid. There are a lot of characters who have potential for growth in Danganronpa games that, because of the nature of the games themselves, have their developments cut off midway through, but not Kuzuryu. He gets the whole package. And it's a really solid one. The line, "I never wanted a tool, I just wanted you." Ugh, hell, it hurts me. Getting misty-eyed just thinking about it. Ultimately, though, I do feel he goes above Peko, just because, unfortunately, as it is, Peko has a little less going on. Also, kind of by virtue of the fact that she dies pretty early in the game, so that's not entirely her fault, but you're gonna see a lot of survivors in these upper tiers. Or at least people that make it a longer while, because they just got more to them. Gundam Tanaka. Gundam is also great. Once again, he has a lot of overlap with Nidai on this one. The reason I would say that he makes it above Nidai, despite sharing that though, is number one, because I think his talent is really fun. It's a very nice contrast to his brooding, dark energy, and then it's just like, oh, he just really likes animals. But also, his bombasticness, his vocal performance, his absolutely metal as hell design. Are you kidding me with that scarf? Are you kidding me with that hair? But also the fact that he's just kind of like a Chunibyo. He's like, I have mystical powers. And he's just like, you know, like a guy that probably runs a live journal. And even though I don't really care that much about Sonya as a character, I do still think that the fact that he shows a different side of himself around her is really fun and sweet. The fact that he saves his hamsters. I can't hate a guy like that. Obviously, I know I already mentioned Chapter 4, but I think the thing that really brings him over that threshold too is his speech at the end of Chapter 4. The whole thing about how it's better to live as fiercely as possible, to really hold on to your life, and to work for it until the very end. I think that that is really, really cool. And honestly, to me, I think that makes a really interesting narrative contrast to the Chapter 4 of the previous game, which is itself referenced in Chapter 4 of SDR2. I like parallels that comment on each other. What can I say? Pretty good character. Hyoko Saionji. I don't think that this is going to be much of a surprise to anybody. Squander potential. Saionji is a character that I could have seen myself liking a whole lot more if she actually got more to do. And she was kind of starting to get to that point. I think at the beginning of Chapter 3, you really start to see her character taking some interesting directions, and I would have liked to see how that panned out. Unfortunately, it didn't, because she died. And I understand that's a Danganronpa game, that's just how it has to happen sometimes. Not all of them are gonna make it. Some character stories are gonna be cut off short. But that's why I don't really care much more about Saionji than I already do. Which is a shame, because I think that she could have done a lot more. Yuta Asahina from Ultra Despair Girls. We're really digging down deep here. Yuta is gonna go at the bottom of had potential. I think he could have made a sort of interesting companion to the story. I would have loved to learn more about his relationship to Asahina, or perhaps even seen how she reacted at all to his death. But really, all Yuta exists for in the present state of the narrative is to show up, be like, hey, I'm related to one of the main characters. and then die. Okay. I forget this guy's name. He's Chihiro's dad, I remember that. This guy's mid. I mean, he's fine. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sad that his kid died and he doesn't know about it, just like I'd be sad at the concept of anybody's kid dying without them knowing it. Him being Chihiro's dad doesn't really make anything about him all that much more interesting to me personally than if he were just some random guy who lost a family member. It's like, okay, cool, that's sad. Anyway, get attacked by a bear. Ah, we've arrived at the person that the bottom spot is reserved for. Come on, Haiji. Come on, get in here. Get in super hell. Here's the thing about Haiji Toa. Narratively, I think that he is, for the most part, exactly what he needs to be. He's a total piece of shit. He's pretty unambiguously abusive. He's probably in many ways responsible for why Monica is the way that she is. He's also a perfect contrast as a leader of the adults opposing the kids in Ultra Despair Girls. It's that whole black and white mentality thing. Ultra Despair Girls focuses on that a lot thematically, about how the kids think that the adults are all monsters that need to die, and the adults think that all of the kids are monsters that need to die. When in reality, the conversation is a lot more complicated than that, and swinging so hell-bent in one direction is why things are not getting done. And in fact, why things are getting worse. So yeah, Haiji represents that camp. He pathologically hates children, but yeah, that unless is why he is down at the bottom. I really don't think that there was a need to do that. I mean, okay, listen, I don't think that you can't have a character who is, you know, a predator. You can say a lot about those types of people in a story. Sure, it's deeply uncomfortable. It's very serious subject matter. You have to treat it with a lot of respect and care, but you can still make a narrative that is worth telling out of that. However, that is not the reason that Haiji Toa has that trait. The reason Haiji Toa has that trait, as far as I can tell, is because somebody thought it was funny, which it's not. So yeah, even though I think that Haiji pretty much is what he needs to be for a majority of the narrative, that one little thing earns him the bottom spot. And I don't think that many people are going to argue with me on that one. In fact, I would say that I was being pretty generous to him. So there you go. Canon from Ultra Despair Hagakure. I don't remember Ultra Despair Hagakure that well, but I do remember enough about it to say that she is a certified Y character. I don't really think I need to get into it that much, just read Ultra Despair Hagakure and you'll see what I mean. Alright, now on to a better character, Komaru Naegi, good for what she is. I think that Komaru is a really enjoyable protagonist. Also, it's nice to have a female protagonist in the series. She's very dynamic, action-oriented. Her transformation over the course of the game where she becomes more confident is really cool to watch. And her friendship with Fukawa is really sweet. I also really like how she's used thematically for the conversation that the game is having. Sure, there's a lot of things about Ultra Despair Girls that suck enough that most people don't pay attention to that. Komaru is not one of those problems. I do think that she can be a little blasé at times. That's kind of why she goes a little bit lower. But overall, good character. Alright, Monica Toa. Good for what they are. There are a lot of characters that go into this tier. Monica I am sort of tempted to put higher, but there are a couple of reasons why she doesn't quite break containment. Personally, I think she is an incredibly compelling antagonist, in that despite the fact that she does incredibly despicable things, you can also see exactly where it all came from. The position that she was born into, the mistreatment from both her father and her brother, the fact that she was inarguably being abused, and that the only person to come to her aid was Junko Enoshima, which I can't say would have made things very easy for her in terms of being a normal, well-adjusted person. I think all of that is really, really compelling. There are several moments that she gets which are really uncomfortable though, and I understand why a lot of people would be turned away from the character as a result. Also, there's no denying that the whole "I faked being a wheelchair user" trope is one that is also pretty harmful. It's used a lot, and once again is one that is prevalent enough that it does somewhat negatively influence how people treat disabled people. Can't say that I'm a fan of that, but I'm also kind of two minds about it. While I do think that similarly to Shou's DID, it is a harmful trope that needs to be scrutinized, I do also think its utilization is quite interesting, specifically in what it is silently saying. Now, this is something that I brought up in my UDG video several years ago, but I think it says a lot that whatever Haiji and her dad were doing to her was bad enough that when she came to them and said that she was paralyzed from the waist down, they literally did not question it at all. Whatever they were doing to her, they thought that that happening as a result was realistic. And so while yes, I think the narrative trope itself kind of sucks, it also really tells you a lot about Monika's character. If she didn't do that, what else would have happened to her? And it plays into the larger scope of everything going on with her character and why is she such a compelling antagonist in that game. She really rides that line and makes you question how much children can be held responsible for their actions if they do atrocious things, and how much empathy you can afford them versus how much empathy is your responsibility to show. And ultimately, I think where UDG comes down on that is a pretty decent answer. And Monika is the central character that makes that conversation as compelling as it is. Bravo. Nagisa Shingetsu. Nagisa's gonna go right down at the end of great here. Oh, if I don't feel bad for kids who go through the enormous gifted child grind, the meat grinder even. I like Nagisa for similar reasons to Monika, but overall he comes out a little bit higher just because there are a few less problems with his presentation. And also I think the little nuance of him sort of swinging over to your side and battling with that and then being ostracized for it is pretty cool. It's clear that the guy is just going through a lot. He really wants to be the responsible one, but it's also because he wants to be wanted. He wants to be appreciated. He wants to be told that he's doing well. And that is a struggle that I can relate to quite intensely. The little Blorbo goes up there. Okay. Kotoko Utsugi. Lil bro, it's complicated. See, the thing about Kotoko is that the concept for her character is very strong. The beginning of her chapter is very strong. And hell, even if I came down really hard on certain aspects of the plot involving her, nowadays I understand the people who say that there is a little bit more nuance to that too, at least in terms of a victim of abuse perpetuating that abuse onto somebody else. I'm not going to get too into it because if you know the deal with Kotoko's character, you know why it's a little fraught to talk about in a silly YouTube video. But I do feel a little bit of regret that in that old video that I made about UDG, I did kind of bounce past the nuance of the way that traumatized children often inflict their own abuse onto others in order to feel in control. That is something that legitimately happens. It is a problem. It is something that a lot of people struggle with. So please understand that I get that. My problem is not so much with the subject itself being broached, it is a problem of presentation. Like with many things in Danganronpa. Once again, you could make a really interesting, compelling narrative out of that if, you approach it in a sensitive and thoughtful way. Unfortunately, Danganronpa sees fit to make a bunch of jokes about something that really doesn't need to have jokes made about it. You can explore that subject without having there be a weird cartoon glove groping minigame that involves a teenager. You can do that without having jokes where you get upskirt shots of a character who's clearly not old enough for that. Very clearly. It's just so frustrating because there are scenes before that point in the chapter where you can actually see them approach the subject of what was done to her in a really down-to-earth, horrifying, but effectively serious way. And this sort of comes back in her boss fight, at least until the end, in a way that when I was playing the game, it actually brought tears to my eyes. I felt so fucking bad for her, but the way that the game treats her at literally every other stage is just abhorrent. It's not funny, it's not cute, it's fucking gross. The way Kotoko is treated in Ultra Despair Girls is single-handedly one of the biggest stains on the entire franchise. I really don't think there's any arguing with that. Could I have discussed the subject a little bit better in my video about it several years ago? Definitely so. But I think we can all still agree that Danganronpa does not do the subject much justice. So, there you go. Jotaro. He's mid. He's one of the first characters that kind of starts to push the narrative theme of UDG, but other characters do it better than him anyway. And other than that, what's his whole deal? His mom called him ugly all the time, and then he's like... He's not, but all of his character traits aside from that are not super interesting to me. So, whatever. Daimon. Daimon is gonna go right between the Imposter and Mizuno, I think. Good for what he is. He's not the member of the Warriors of Hope that I think has the most compelling backstory going on or anything, but I still think it is one that a lot of people can relate to, and the way it's depicted is, while raw, done very tactfully. It's pretty tough to watch, and honestly, Daimon seems like a pretty realistic kid. There's not really a whole lot that I have to say about him other than that. He's a bit of a firebrand, he's rambunctious, probably likes Power Rangers. You hate to see him suffer. He serves his purpose. Shirokuma. Shirokuma is also sort of complicated. Narratively, I think that Shirokuma's intention is very interesting, as it is with Kurokuma. The whole idea of a squishy, hopeful, nice character who is made to inspire the adults, but actually behind the scenes is just making them more depressed and generally being a little piece of shit snake. is pretty cool. I like that. As for how Shirokuma actually comes across in most of the text, though, it's pretty much just, "Oh, I'm a little baby, please help me." So, you know, nothing particularly gripping. You know, decent concept, but kind of annoying in practice. Kurikuma is funny. I'm sorry. Is he cringe? Absolutely. Does it make me laugh every time? Oh yeah. Hiroko Hagakure. I think I didn't accommodate for every tier that I needed. Hold up, let me fix this. Alright, moving right along. If you want my actual opinion on Hiroko Hagakure, it's that she's, you know, she's fine. She's nice. If I seem a little low energy at the beginning of this part, it's because I lost some of my recording and I have to redo it. Anyway, it appears that we've made it to the DR3 characters. So, let me just go ahead and get this out of the way. I'm sorry.
I'm not.
Well, yeah, I could have told you that. In all seriousness, if you're looking for a come to Jesus arc here, where I'm like, actually guys, Danganronpa 3 was good, that is not what you're gonna get. I'm gonna try to be fair to these characters, and I think I actually have some decent things to say about them. So if you're expecting me to slap them all in the bottom and say that they suck too, that's also not gonna happen. But you know, the fact remains that even though I do think I could have presented my opinions on this show in a better manner back when I made my DR3 video, which I'll remind you was nearly 3 years ago, even if that is the case, I still largely maintain my feelings about the show. I think that we can respectfully disagree about it, but if you're of the mindset that I'm just wrong for not liking it, then I don't think that's a really worthwhile discussion to be having. I promise you, the scary trans woman online is not going to take DR3 away from you. Unless... no, my powers don't work anymore. But for real, I'm gonna go into these characters being as fair as I possibly can, and hopefully nobody will send me death threats over it this time. Yes, people did send me death threats last time. Starting off with Kizakura. Kizakura is a character that I would say is good for what they are. I think his relationship to the Kirigiris is pretty interesting. I like his stupid hat. I think he's overall a pretty chill guy. Sure, he says some cringe shit to Kirigiri here and there, which I could do without, but hey, he's definitely no Teru Teru. He's like the Ryoji Kaji of Danganronpa. I don't love him, but he's a nice guy. And there's really not any point at which I would say he brings the narrative down. If anything, I'd say he brings the narrative up. So, yeah, there you go. Solid. Okay, Kyosuke Munakata. Munakata is a had potential kind of character. I think the basis for his character is actually really interesting. I mean, if you were a fan of Danganronpa before this point, you would probably agree that hope and despair became overused platitudes that got ran into the ground over and over again by this point. So having a character who kind of embodies that thought is actually really interesting. The problem with Munakata lies in two things. One is repetition. No matter how interesting of a statement you have to make, if you say it a million times, it just kind of becomes annoying. It's like Professor Means from Ace Attorney. The first time he says the ends justify the means, it may be a little on the nose, but you're like, yeah, I can pick up what they're putting down. The 50th time he says it, it's like, okay, I get it. Like, trust me, I'm not a baby. I understand themes. And that leads into problem number 2 with Munakata, which is sauce. What did she mean by this? I'll explain. Imagine that you have a really good home-style sauce. You make that shit and it's so yummy. Everybody loves it. And you make a cup worth of sauce. But here's the problem. You just realized you kind of need like 3 cups worth of sauce. There's more people here than you thought. So, okay, what are you gonna do? Well, turns out you don't have enough ingredients in the kitchen to make a full 3 cups of sauce. You are definitely gonna run out. So, what does any hack cook do? They water that shit down. They spread it as thin as humanly possible. And you know what? Even though that sauce was really good, people are gonna taste that watered down sauce and they're gonna be like, yeah, you didn't have enough of this, did you? Kinda just makes it worse. And to me, that's what Munakata is. He's got some real good sauce, but there's just not enough of it. His basis as a character, pretty solid. Unfortunately, given the amount of episodes that he has to carry across, I just think it's spread way too thin. He should have either been slightly less of an important character, or if they wanted him to be as important as he was, I think they should have given him a little bit more to do. Overall, not the world's worst character or anything, just kinda feels like there should have been more. Psycho Kimura is, I would say, good for what they are. This is kind of a simple one, and I admit that there is a little bit of a bias to it. I just really like Psycho's character design. It's really fun. The medical mask, even the goofy werehog shit. It's just nice. I also think her conflict with Ruruka had a lot of potential, but didn't quite pan out. I'll say more about that when I get to Ruruka herself. Overall, the reason why she gets above the potential range, though, is just because I think that most of her screen time unrelated to that is still decent enough to carry her. And again, yeah, there is a little bit of a bias bias. Look, it's my list, I can do what I want. Oh yeah, also the idea of having a super high school level pharmacist, pretty cool talent. Kinda wish that they did more with it, but you can't say that they didn't do anything with it, so there you go. Also, unrelated to her qualities as a character, I do just think it's really funny to be able to say that she gave Komida laxatives. Like, what a funny place in the narrative to occupy. Yeah, you know, I know all of us here at the Future Foundation have dealt with tremendous loss. Some of us have seen the remnants of despair take our loved ones from us. I helped one of them poop. Natsumi Kuzuryu. Natsumi is a little bit of a complicated one. I'm gonna chalk that up to had potential. As you know, I'm a pretty big fan of SDR2 Case 2. I think Twilight Syndrome is a really cool set piece. I think that Twilight Syndrome was at its most interesting when it was left a little vague though, and I'm just not really a fan of how DR3 did it. As I've made clear, I think there are some weird inconsistencies in how the situation is depicted, especially in regards to the reserve course stuff, but completely disregarding all of that for a second, let's just actually think about it in terms of DR3's sole narrative. Because if we're talking about Natsumi Kuzuryu as a character, in SDR2, she didn't really have a character. Narratively, the most we got from her was the DR3 anime. So, isolated to that, I think that she was pretty decent. I wouldn't say that she was a great character, I wouldn't even say that she was a particularly good character, though don't mistake that as me saying that she was bad. Despite my weird inconsistency hiccups, I do think that on its own, the idea of her being a reserve course student that Hinata gets to know is a decent narrative beat to want to explore. Sure, I also think that a lot of Hinata's neuroses kind of come from the fact that he is such an isolated person, but I don't think that you can't get around that by saying he did try to form these connections, but then they were taken from him. That is a decent angle to take. It gives you a little bit more of a ground view of the reserve course stuff. And though I don't know if I think Natsumi should have been the character to do that with, I don't think that the idea was necessarily a bad one. But unfortunately for me, the reason why this goes into had potential as opposed to any higher is because, simply put, Natsumi just doesn't really do a whole lot. She's there for a little bit to be aggressive, but show a little bit of a soft side, and then she's murdered by Sato. There's really not a whole lot more to it than that. And granted, she doesn't really have to do a whole lot more than that, but that's why I just don't really hold her in especially high regard. So there you go. Speaking of Sato, she's next on the list. Sato is gonna go in the same column right below Natsumi. Don't get me wrong, I like myself some toxic Yuri, but her relationship with Koizumi is just nothing. I really don't feel like I get a sense for their interactions or much of what's going on with them pretty much at all. I mean, yeah, there's the whole thing of them being former classmates and all that, but there's really not a whole lot more there to be like, this is why I should care about their relationship. It just kind of amounts to, I know this girl, and I would kill for her. Okay, why? Oh, no, that's it. Cool. Again, it's the sort of thing that could have been really interesting, but it just doesn't really seem like they had the time to get into it, or the interest to do so either. So therefore, my interest is also not really piqued. Jin Kirigiri. He's mid. I mean, okay, don't get me wrong. He's a funny skeleton man. He's in the rocket. Iconic. You know, thank you, Jin Kirigiri. I almost forgive you for being criminally incompetent. But really, Jin doesn't exist for much more than to just be like, you know, the principal who wanted to do the right thing and then accidentally let the apocalypse happen. Also kind of a deadbeat dad, but you know, he does love you. And don't get me wrong, I'm not emotionless, obviously. It gets to me, but there's really not a whole lot more to say about Jin. I mean, even the most important stuff happening in Hope's Peak Academy is more of a result of the steering committee. Jin is just kind of the well-meaning patsy, so to speak. So, yeah. Whatever. Okay, we're getting into a lightning round of a bunch of characters who are so minor that they barely warrant any discussion. I don't know. Skipping Chisa for a second, you're just gonna go over here. You too, Bandai. I don't know. All these guys die in like 2 seconds. Do you really expect me to say that much about them? Alright, Chisa. Where do I put you? Chisa is gonna go right next to her boyfriend. Chisa is a character who on her face, I think is, you know, pleasant. She has a nice disposition. I think the whole idea of a sort of homeroom teacher in an eccentric school who can kind of take all these loner kids and tell them, no, you will experience the power of friendship, or I will die. It's fun. It's cute. It's charming. I don't think that Chisa doesn't have any enjoyable moments to speak of. I also think her being turned into despair goop is, well, I mean, while I have issues with that plot element, is still decently tragic. I mean, yeah, at that point, it's just kind of a Munakata man pain thing in some ways. But, you know, I can see the potential there. I think the main problem for me with Chisa, though, is that she's such a Swiss Army knife character that, ironically, I would say that her own personality sort of gets lost in the hodgepodge. There's not really a whole lot that I can tell you about Chisa other than that she's really nice and she's really good at a lot of things. And she's sociable. She's good with kids. She believes in Munakata. But other than that, like what? She tells Juzo to stay away from her man. Don't get in my way, yaoi boy. I know what you are. I kid. Yeah, I don't know. I've had a lot of interesting potential ideas about what could be done with Chisa as a character if Danganronpa 3's plot was a lot different. But I don't really need to spin fanfiction here. I'm just telling you my unfiltered thoughts. So, there you go. Could have been worse. Could have been better, though. Bandai. Okay. Why is Bandai? I'll tell you what Bandai's for. He dies. No, literally, that's it. He's there to explain the rules. Die within like 2 seconds. But he has a squeaky voice. Funny. Also, his design is questionable. Listen, I'm not going to debate on this one too hard. This isn't a problem that is unique to Danganronpa 3. This is a problem that permeates throughout the whole franchise. Danganronpa gets a little weird with its POC characters now and then. Whether it's something like this, or it's just straight up fetishization, or whatever the fuck is going on with Angie. We'll get to that. Yeah, not much more to say on that. The Great Gozu. Oh yeah, man. Slide right to the top of current funny. I have almost literally nothing to say about him. I mean, he's nice. He dies way too early for me to really form that much more of an opinion on him other than that. But just the sheer idea, the energy of him, one of the greatest fictional characters of all time, the Great Gozu. I think we can all agree on this. Miyaya Gecko Gahara. Gecko Gahara will join the club of had potential. Because here's the thing about Gecko Gahara, we literally don't know almost anything about her. We know that she worked on the Neo World program. That's pretty much it, because the Gecko Gahara we actually see in DR3 is not even her. It's just a robot being controlled by Monica. So yeah, you literally don't know much, if anything, about the real Gecko Gahara. Which, you know, if the Monica plotline went more of somewhere, I would honestly think was kind of cool in some ways. But as it stands, it just kind of feels like you had a cool idea for a character, and then you were like, yeah, we're not using that. Okay, then I have no opinion. Ruruka Ando. Ruruka is actually gonna go in It's Complicated. I think that Ruruka narratively fulfills her purpose pretty well. Like, yeah, she's supposed to be a bit of a snake. She's supposed to be a bit dislikable, but she is also supposed to have qualities that let you know that she is just kind of a flawed person. She's self-conscious. She wants people to appreciate who she is and what she does, and she sabotages a lot of her relationships based on the fear that she will be betrayed. And she gets one of the most brutal deaths in the series because of it. Maybe even a little bit too much so, actually. But I think she just needed a lot more build-up. I think the conclusion of her character is really strong. Interesting, even. But Ruruka's character is kind of like there are 3 books in a series and I'm missing the second one. It's like, great follow-up, I wish I had all the stuff that should have come before this. Because really all we get of Ruruka to really establish the meat of her character is her backstory stuff with Psycho, which, as I've already established, I think is kind of weak. Like, yeah, characters are allowed to be hypocritical and obstinate, and I think there are plenty of ways that you could have portrayed that, but it honestly just kind of comes across as, why won't my friend stop being diabetic? How selfish of her. I know that you're supposed to think that Ruruka is also being selfish in that situation. It's just kind of difficult to see where she's coming from. I mean, honestly, I think you could have gotten into some more interesting things there. You could have maybe played around with the fact that Psycho is a pharmacist. Have Ruruka say, hey, if you're so good at pharmaceuticals, why don't you make some fancy insulin? I just want to share this part of myself with you because you're my friend, and this is something that's really important to me. Then Psycho's refusal, while still understandable, would still come across as a bit more of an actual pointed rejection, which I think would lead to a more natural rift between the two. But as it stands, it's like, sorry, no, eating that will kill me. Well, then you should just die. That's how it feels. So, yeah. Oh yeah, also her candy can literally, like, mind control people. Kind of feels like that would be something that you would be wary of, too. How dare she not want to eat the gobstopper that I could use to make her do anything? I don't know, I'm being kind of silly. Point is, cool ideas, but in execution, Oh boy, it's Meteorite time. He's the boy who gets a mid. I don't really care about Mitarai. Sorry. I know that there are a lot of people out there that really like Mitarai. I would actually say that his relationship with the imposter is one of the sweeter parts of Despair Arc, so I can definitely see where some of the love comes from. But I just don't really think that much about Mitarai himself. And I think what really makes Mitarai slightly more egregious in that respect is that he becomes so important. Like, if he was just some guy standing in the background and he didn't really have that much to contribute, he'd be about as inoffensive as somebody like the Great Gozu. I mean, he wouldn't be as funny, but none of us can be. But the fact that he's, like, part of the SDR2 class, and basically the entire ending revolves around him, just gives me a serious feeling of, like, I don't even know this kid. DR3 tries to be a capstone to everything that came before it and really wrap up the series. And the prominent character featured in that climax is a guy that we literally haven't met until just now. And I don't know, I just feel like that's kind of weird. Also, the main way he gains relevance in the plot is literally for Junko to walk up to him, place a hand on his shoulder, and go, "Yeah, I reckon you're gonna be important." I mean, seriously, I can't get over that. They couldn't think of a better way for those two to meet each other, other than Junko just happening to walk out of a building while he's walking by, seeing him, and then being like, wait a minute, my plot radar's going off. It just comes across so forced to me. Yeah, I just don't really care for him that much. I think his talent is interesting. I think making it sort of the meta subject of DR3 as a work was also a really weird choice, though. Wow. Anime can be really beautiful and impactful on our lives. You know, that's true. A little bit weird to say in the first anime original entry of a franchise mostly consisting of video games, but, you know, go off. Hey, I don't know. Again, it's a thing where Mitarai could have been a whole lot worse. I don't think he's like the worst character ever. I think people who say he's the worst character in Danganronpa are heavily exaggerating, but I also think that for my money, calling him great would be extremely generous. Okay. Izuyoi. Izuyoi is gonna kind of go to like the bottom of had potential for me. The reason for this isn't so much that Izuyoi has much of a character, because really as he exists in the actual show, his main role is to stand around and say, "I'm Ruruka's boyfriend," and that's it. The real reason I put him in had potential is because I think that he has a cool design, and I think that Blacksmith is a metal as hell talent to have. So yeah, there's really not a whole lot to say about him other than that. I just wish that they had done more with that character concept, because that would have been pretty cool. Also, you could have worked him into the conflict with Ruruka and Psycho a little bit more, but c'est la vie. Okay, it's DR3 Nanami time. And like I said, she is basically a separate character. This is the human Nanami who lived a life, as opposed to the AI Nanami, which is sort of an alter ego thing. Sort of. Yeah, I know Austin went a little angry video game nerd on her. Was it hyperbolic? Yeah. Was it over the top? Yes. Do I like her though? Not really. DR3 Nanami goes on the high end of why for me. Mostly just because I honestly think the plot would have just worked better without her. If you're a big fan of DR3 Nanami, no hate to ya. If you enjoy that character, that's totally fine. For me though, I think all of the interesting narrative threads that Despair Arc could have possibly had could have been done in much more interesting ways without Nanami there. And that's not because I hate Nanami, that's just because I think that her role is very extraneous. And I think the ways in which she does directly interface with the plot of Despair Arc are things that are kind of made flatter and less interesting because of how they do them with her. Look, we don't have to get into all of it. Her flatness of character is something that actually kind of overlaps with my problems with DR2 Nanami. It's just that I feel like plot-wise it's way more egregious here. And obviously DR3 is not a 20+ hour video game, so you also have a lot less time to develop her as a standalone character, which again adds to that egregiousness. Yeah, I don't know. She's not like the spawn of Satan or anything. I just don't really think that she should have been there. There you go. Alright, Juzo Sakakura. Rejoice, Danganronpa 3 fans. I have something good to say. Done dirty, but I love you anyway. A pretty solid ranking, I would say. Juzo as a character is one that I actually think has a decently compelling arc. I think the way that you kind of learn about him in reverse, see his sort of failings as a person, but also the ways in which he is genuinely a guy who does want good things for people, is honestly pretty solid. I think his talent is cool. I think his loyalty to Munakata is cool. And look, Danganronpa made a gay character and didn't make him a horrific stereotype. Oh, if only we could ask for that from many other franchises. Ace Attorney, I'm looking at you. Also, ultimately, I think his sacrifice at the end of the plot is really fucking well handled. It's genuinely sad. I actually felt real human emotions for him. When he's like in that room, knelt over, and like the power comes back on and they kick in, oh god, what's the name of the song again? Recall the End? That shit fucking slaps. I mean, Recall the End is just a great song regardless. But like that moment is really good. It's really solid. But yes, there are asterisks. While I do think that as a gay character, he's not like turned into a horrible stereotype or anything, I do think the plot point is a little messy. I do remember a lot of people back in the day getting really mad about Junko outing him as a plot point. People were like, oh my god, how could you make Junko out somebody for being gay? You know, that's a really problematic thing to do. Like, yeah, no she's a mass murderer. I don't think that that's nearly the worst thing that she's done, actually. They just hate to see a homophobic bisexual queen winning. But yeah, no, seriously, I get why people were kind of rubbed the wrong way by it. I think that saying Junko wouldn't do something like that is really funny. Yeah, she would. But it does still carry some interesting implications. It's like, oh yeah, how dare this gay man not want to come out for fear of being ostracized, or having his feelings rejected, or having the man that he loves look at him differently. That sucks. I get it. So then to be like, you know, Juzo not coming forth with his feelings for Munakata may have been one of the things that kickstarted the tragedy, and that's why everybody died. Yeah, that's a little, I don't know. I get why people would be a little put off by that. But overall, I don't know. Juzo, pretty solid character. I really don't have that many complaints about him. I mean, sure, he's a jackass. Real swell of him to beat up teenagers. That'll make him love you, man. Just tell that teenage boy he's worthless just a few more times. But no, seriously, I quite like him. Okay. Tengen, stop. Moratorium on Tengen jokes. Look, I get it. I know. It's positively bursting out of you, and me too. The funny, fast old man joke is one that has repeated ad infinitum in pretty much everything that I've watched with my friends. Recently, we've been hyping up Captain Kuro from One Piece, and saying that he was responsible for everything in the series. Just one of his 1,000 plans, if you will. So I get it, it's a fun joke, and Tengen is a funny character to do it with. And I know that we're the ones who are responsible for that joke, but there are more things to say about Kazuo Tengen that are not related to the Tengen jokes. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about Kazuo Tengen. And we're really gonna have to talk over this one before we place him, so keep that in mind. I think that Tengen is a really interesting character in a lot of ways. I think having a sort of old guard Hope's Peak guy that sort of represents a little bit more about what was actually going on in the background at the school, you know, that Jin Kirigiri wasn't always aware of, is a really interesting angle to approach. I think the whole idea of like somebody who was caught up in the old guard and saw the ways that it failed, and who sees the future in somebody like Midori, is actually a really cool idea to explore. I think his interactions with Hinata are decently solid. I don't know that I would have said everything that he said, but I get where he was coming from. I just kind of wish that his culpability in some of those things had been explored a little bit more. You know, maybe some more of his regret. I mean, when he goes all Kung Fu Grandpa on Munakata and they have their little dialogue, you can see the inklings of something really interesting there, but ultimately I feel like they just don't quite go enough into it. I also think that his position as the mastermind, as funny as it is in the actual series, is still something that you could have done a lot of cool stuff with. I just think that the way that it was done was kinda dumb. Also, his plan, I can't stress enough that his plan is still just extremely bizarre to me. I'm gonna force Midori to take action by almost getting him killed. Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like you could have done this in a lot of better ways. I don't know, maybe his brain was just soup. Overall, I think Tengen is a character that, while his actual utilization in the series left a lot to be desired, I still see a lot of actual potential in him. And in a better version of the story, I could see him genuinely being a pretty A-tier character. So obviously, he goes at the top of funny. Okay, we're done with Danganronpa 3. I know, it was a gauntlet, but look, we're all still okay and we're still having fun. And that's what matters, right? Okay, listen, you don't need to bring the gun out. Ryoko Otanashi. I don't think I need to get too into this one. Like, yeah, she's great. Obviously, she's not necessarily the same character as Junko, so I could get into more explicit reasons why I like Ryoko. But the ways I like Ryoko's character the most are the ways in which she contrasts Junko's character, and the things that she says about Junko's character, in the fact that she exists the way that she does. Also, in her relationship with another character that we'll be getting to shortly. I'm sorry if you wanted me to say more about Ryoko. I know that there are a lot of diehard Ryoko stans out there, but I think you kind of feel what I'm putting down, right? And speaking of that other character, Yasuke Matsuda is also a great character. What can I say? The ways in which he's terse on the outside but genuinely cares on the inside, the ways in which he actually holds a great loyalty to Junko as a friend, and the ways in which he is horrifically betrayed because of that, but also in the way that that betrayal speaks more of Junko's love toward him than almost anything else. It's just good. It's good stuff. It's wretched stuff. It makes you want to crawl out of your skin. When I read that for the first time and I saw all of that, I was like, but that's just some of the best entertainment that you get out of the Danganronpa series. And for that, I can't say that he's not a great character. This little piece of shit goes to hell with Teru Teru. If you've read Danganronpa Zero, you know why. Madurai, let's go. Get right over there and funny where you belong, bro. Jesus. Sorry if this is sort of incoherent. Madurai has sort of become a meme character to a lot of my friends, so I just can't not look at him and crack up. Okay, these are a lot of characters from Killer Killer. I'll save you a lot of time and heartache and say that number one, I haven't read Killer Killer in a really long time, and number two, I didn't really like Killer Killer when I read it. So this might be a little bit of a cop-out, but everybody from Killer Killer is just kind of gonna go in IDK. Sucks. But what can you do? It did not really leave much of an impression on me. Tengen was in it though, and that was funny. Okay, you know, why don't we just go ahead and get some of the more extra characters out of the way too. Some of these are from novels that I haven't read, so might as well just get them out of the way. Oh, Fukawa's Stinkbug. Great character. Alright, now that just leaves us with the Danganronpa V3 cast. Starting off with one Maki Harukawa, who is great. I've already sang the praises of dear old Harumaki back in my V3 video, so if you want a more extensive opinion of her, you should probably just watch that because it hasn't changed very much. I think her development is pretty solid. I think that her character is interesting and charming. I always love a narrative about a tough antisocial girl who learns to love, and then has it brutally taken away. I think the whole underpinning of somebody who is capable of incredible violence, but somebody who also undeniably possesses a very warm heart underneath it, it's just a trope that I'm a sucker for. Also, her romance with Momota, while it isn't my favorite ship in the world, still works relatively well, and I think plays into the final reveal of the game pretty well too, at least in terms of what it's thematically going for. You know, the whole thing with like, even though this is a construct, even though this isn't real, it still matters, you know? Yeah, Maki's just, I just love her. A lot of people gave me shit for being so positive to Maki. A lot of people were like, you like Maki, opinion discarded. Well, okay. I'm also discarding your opinion. Two can play at that game. Click on my video for my opinion and then get mad at me when I say it. Get out of here. Ooh, following up with a tough one. Korekyo Shinguji. That is a had potential right there. Again, I kind of already went over it in my V3 video, but I think there were a lot of interesting things you could have done with the case that Shinguji was a part of. I think playing into the rule where he could have gotten away with murder, where only the first one counted, by tricking somebody else into doing it first, could have been both really despicable and really metal. It's like, oh my god, we're occupying the school with a murderer. And then the next chapter involves the Neo World program, so then it makes even more sense that they would want to use it, because what is it known for? Rehabilitation. We just slap Shinguji in there and hope he becomes a better person, and then everything goes to shit. I don't know, it wouldn't have worked with every plot element that was going on in V3, but I think you could have done a whole lot more with them. Also, like, clearly dude was being abused by his big sister. And once again, instead of opting to explore that in a thoughtful and interesting way, Danganronpa turns it into a joke. It sure likes to do that. How many characters now do we have that fall under that category? Hey. But anyway, Kokichi Oma. Oma is gonna go at the current top of its complicated, like he would want. Like many characters can sometimes be microcosms of Danganronpa, I would say that Kokichi Oma is basically a microcosm of Danganronpa V3. His whole thing is lies. The ways in which lies can be harmful and the ways in which they can be good. He literally says that lies aren't always bad. He infuriatingly skitters away from being understood at all times. That's who he is. But sometimes a lie can feel more true than the actual truth. Sometimes a lie can be gentle. Sometimes a lie can hurt people. Sometimes lies can help people. That is exactly what Kokichi Oma's character is about. It is that duality. Unfortunately, Kokichi Oma occupies a different duality, which is being interesting and being annoying. And I know that's not a very unique perspective, but regardless, I know that it's kind of part and parcel of the point, and that is kind of intentional, but it still doesn't mean that he's any less irritating to deal with sometimes. Still, I think that at least conceptually they were cooking. I just think the meal was a little cold in the middle. Kurumi Tojo, good for what you are. Tojo is fine. Her murder plan is pretty interesting. Her motive is, well, it's a little much, but I can see what they were going for with it. And overall, the sort of unspoken dynamic between herself and Hoshi during his murder is decently interesting in the ways that they do understand each other and in the ways that she fails to understand him. Could have done without the fan service in her execution though, like, bro, I do not think that this is the time for that. Speaking of which, Ryoma Hoshi. I actually think that Hoshi is great. I think that his design is so silly. His backstory is actually quite compelling. His voice. I love this dude's voice, both in English and Japanese. It's just so silky smooth on the ears. And honestly, his whole deal, his struggle with wanting to live, is honestly very relatable. I would honestly say it's even a little powerful. I did express some misgivings about how this arc was handled later on in my original V3 video. Like, oh, he just lets himself be killed by Tojo. That's kind of sad. But as people pointed out in the comments on that video, the whole scrapes on the sink thing does imply that he at least put up a little bit more of a fight, whether that was more of an instinct thing or whether he did actually want to live, being left kind of ambiguous. And I think that that's decently interesting. It definitely does soften the blow of that plot point just a little bit, though I do still squint a little. Overall though, yeah, I really like Hoshi. Rantaro Amami. Oh boy. Yep, that's a had potential right there. He's really the type of character that comes across as super interesting and intriguing, and then they just immediately kill him. And I know that was kind of the point. They did it on purpose, you see. Oh, we got you. But I don't know. I think even Kodaka realized, like, I probably shouldn't have killed him off so early. I don't know, there was just a whole lot more that you could have done. Especially with somebody who survived a previous killing game, are you kidding me? That's just Prince money. But whatever, we didn't really get a whole lot of them in the end. I would have liked to get more, but we don't get everything we want in life. Danganronpa S is proof of that. Kaito Momota goes to the top of it is complicated. Because here's the thing, I really do like Momota a lot. He's like the Kamina, and not just because they share a voice actor. And I really like characters like that. But the trans-misogynistic attitudes, yeah, don't really care much for that. Fun fact, by the way, I actually stumbled across somebody on a Reddit thread that was several years old, bumping a dead post to blame me exclusively for people thinking that Momota is homophobic. Yeah, me bringing up a piece of text that's in the actual game, that's a bad thing. And I'm solely responsible for that, even though the thread that they were responding to was about that topic and was several years older than my video. I love Danganronpa fans. Their reading comprehension off the charts. No, I am not the first person to have ever talked about that. I mean, it may not be mentioned often in videos. It was mostly in translation blog posts before that point, but it's okay, Lone Redditor. I know that you don't read. I don't hold it against you. Okay, but seriously. Yeah, like, Momota is the type of character that I honestly find very charming. I would love to be that guy's friend. And especially when all that shit is kind of written under the rug, I like to think that he's the kind of guy who would be like, hey, going to the bathroom? Do you want me to stand outside the door? You get what I mean? He's just a good man. But we kind of can't deny the reality here. He does have problems. And some of those problems are really shitty writing problems. And trust me, I have dealt with enough people in my comments telling me that that slur that he said, well, you know, a lot of people say that. And you know, a lot of people don't mind it. Except here's the thing, a lot of people do. And I don't think it's really anybody's place to say, hey, that shouldn't make you uncomfortable. Like, I didn't know that I needed your permission. Anywho, I like him, but there's an asterisk. Okay, on to the Mono Cubs. We're gonna go sort of short order here. Starting off with Monotaro. He's funny. He would be more funny if they didn't do that with him in Monophony. We got Monosuke. He's also going into funny. He's just slightly more funny. I think his silly accent in the dub is great. Pretty much what it boils down to. We got Mono Kid. Less funny than Monotaro. There are some ways in which he's supposed to be intentionally funny, and I think it's really cringe, but it's so cringe that it kind of loops back around to being funny. Get over here, Monofunny. Monodam. Funny also. When he tries to take over, I wish he honestly did more. Also when he fucking kills Mono Kid. Tonally, I don't think it was the right time, but in concept, yeah, pretty funny. And Monofunny. Why? The thing about Monofunny is they basically just make her Monomi, but worse. She doesn't really have as much of a jokey gimmick as the other ones. She lasts too long into the narrative to be completely inoffensive. She's also part of that absolutely infuriating joke with Monotaro. It's just not right. She's pretty much on a similar tier as the other Monocubs. She just doesn't make me laugh like they do. So there you go. Angie. Angie is a Y. Sorry, Angie fans, but I really just can't get past some of these details. I've said before that Danganronpa is not always great with its POC characters, and this is one of my primary examples of that. Also, the localization makes it even worse by using the name of an actual real-life god that is worshipped by some Polynesian people, when in the original script, she just says god and doesn't specify which god. And you know, the whole thing about that is that she's using the vague term kami to make it apply to literally whoever she's trying to sell it to, because that's kind of her thing. She's like a cult manipulator. It's why she does the whole student council So she has to make her description of God as vague as humanly possible so that you can project whatever you want to on it. So then saying that her god is a specific god not only defeats the purpose, but is also really f***ing weird. When you're taking an actual Polynesian god that people worship, and then having Angie who's like, oh yeah, I'm into human sacrifice and shit. Do we not perhaps think that that's a little bit tone deaf? Maybe? Just a little bit? I think that she had some potential plot-wise, but the sheer basis of this character was so horrifically bungled that I really don't feel comfortable putting her any higher than this. Hi, this is Editing Marcy. I just wanted to come here at the last second and sort of clarify what I was getting at aside from the dub issue, because I kind of skimmed over it by accident. Basically what I was trying to get at, other than that, is that I just don't really like the fact that Angie is so sort of like fetishized, in that she's like portrayed as this, ooh, exotic lady, but is also like backwards, and I feel dirty saying it like this, but they basically portray her as a savage. And I just think that's kind of distasteful, if you feel me. The Nano Kumas. Funny. Mother Kuma. I'll say no more. Whatever this f***ing abomination is. Funny. This random guy, who cares? Alright, finally, real characters again. Gonta Gokuhara. This one is kind of tough because I'm tempted to just put him in good for what they are, but because of extenuating circumstances, I think he has to go in done dirty, but I love you anyway. The done dirty in this case is mostly to do with the localization, but since most English-speaking people who play the game are going to be playing that version, it still kind of applies. A lot of people really got the wrong impression of this character by the whole caveman speech thing. Because as I have said before in my V3 video, he does not do that in the Japanese version of the game. So to me, I feel like this kind of ends up with the conversation leaning toward people assuming that Gonta was way less in control of his actions than he actually was. And I think that that's a shame, because his character is so much more interesting when you understand that he knew what he was doing. Sure, he forgot, obviously, and the current himself in Chapter 4 can't even comprehend why he would do something like that. But what's so tragic is that yes, he did make that decision. Sure, yes, he was in some ways tricked by Oma, but that wasn't all on Oma. And that dynamic is what makes Chapter 4 of DRV3 so intriguing to me. It's one of the best chapters in the game, and Gonta elevates it really high. But I feel like a lot of the conversation surrounding his character just kinda goes in the wrong direction, because the localization gives them a very skewed impression of who Gonta as a character is. Also, his execution is kinda bad. I do really like him though. Himiko. I don't really care. Like, don't get me wrong. I think the whole thing with her being a magician and her belief in magic kind of tying into the theme of fiction, a warm, kind lie, is pretty cool. But other than that, I just don't really think that she contributes much. She gets sad when Tenko dies, even though before that it kind of seemed like she couldn't stand her. And then she's like, I'm gonna become better. And then she just kind of remains on the same note for the rest of the game. Not a terrible character or anything, but I just don't really care. Also, that whole thing I said about the magic stuff, done a whole lot better by Maria Ushiramiya. Himiko, you wish you were her. Alright, on to Kibo. Kibo is gonna go in had potential. I kinda like Kibo at some points. At other points though, he just kind of fades into the background. I think the whole thing of him being the POV for the audience is really cool. I also think that him sort of being manufactured to be the typical Danganronpa protagonist is really cool. I think that him being a robot is really cool. I think that him blowing a bunch of shit up is really cool. Although it just kind of feels like a funny, convenient way to get rid of him at the end. But other than that, yeah, I struggled to think of a whole lot to actually say about him. Lots of really interesting ideas, but nothing that sort of super coalesces. Kaede Akamatsu is a great character. I really like Kaede. She's got a lot to like about her. She's very peppy. I like that they sort of explore that sort of more toxic side of positivity. Not that she's doing anything wrong, but in the ways that it just doesn't always work out, and how that can lead you to some kind of dark places. People obviously have very mixed feelings about the fake out regarding her and Saiha Saihara, and I understand that. I also probably would have preferred Kaede remain the main character, but I do still think that the reveal itself is effective, and I do think that it is kind of cool. Just, you know, they could have done it in a better way. A lot of people say that they should have just done it by reversing the roles, you know, making Saihara the one that looks like the main character who dies, and then Kaede becomes the main character. But I kind of struggle with this, because here's the thing. Saihara as a character is sort of tailor-made for the position in the narrative that he has. Everything about his personality and his backstory ties into the game itself. Kaede doesn't really have that. She was, in essence, made to die. And if you don't like that, I get it. I honestly kind of agree with you. But the narrative function that she was made to serve was served by what they did with her. And I think that for what it's worth, it was done pretty well. Could it have been done better? Definitely. But to me, the intention still got across crystal clear. God, I need some water. Tsumugi Shirogane. That would have to be a done dirty, but I love you anyway. I think in concept, Tsumugi is one of the most interesting masterminds in the series. The idea of somebody so obsessed with their one niche hyperfixation that they literally have no personality outside of it. They're barely even a person. And what that says about franchise stagnation, what that says about the kind of people who are drawn to endless sequels to the same thing over and over, while no new creative ideas are actually being explored. The kind of person who would unironically say, if this is a world without Danganronpa, then I don't want to be a part of it. Like, girl, play Ace Attorney. I find that all really cool. I find the twist in V3 really cool. And I find the ways in which that twist is challenged to be really cool. Whether it's people saying that, you know, fiction has an inherent value, that just because it isn't real doesn't mean how you feel about it isn't also real, but also kind of cool in the way that Tsumugi herself is probably also being tricked. I mean, on Loop 1, it doesn't look like she's the mastermind. If Team Danganronpa works the way we think it does, it's not outside the realm of possibility that they just tricked her into taking this role as sort of a fall guy, if you will. I think that that's really cool. In practice, however, Tsumugi is just kind of boring. And I mean, yeah, it kind of plays into the actual narrative of her character. You know, she's just like sitting around being like, oh, I'm boring. I don't really have any interest. Because she doesn't. She's an empty shell of a person. And that's intentional. But it still doesn't really make her very entertaining for most of the game. So when she shows up and she's like, actually, I'm the mastermind. It's like, okay. Like, you know, I get the intention of the character at the end of the day, and I still think it's a cool intention that I f with. But as for her actual character, couldn't really care less. Tanko Chibashira. This is yet another done dirty but I love you anyway situation. I don't know, there are just a lot of things about Tenko's character that, for me, that I just like. For one, I really like her hyper-specific talent. Her passion contrasted with her naivete is like an interesting narrative thread. I think the things that she says to Himiko are very interesting. Her design is fun, even if I really don't like that one sprite of hers. But the degenerate male thing does get really grating really fast. Also, I just really hate the word degenerate. Pro tip, my friends, even if jokingly, if you're using the word degenerate all the time, you sound like a Nazi. Cut it out. So yeah, I can't exactly say that I'm fond of that. Also, even though I know a lot of people cite this scene as her being an ally, the whole thing where she's like, Saihara, I would respect you if you got a sex change, is like, forgive me if I don't exactly interpret that in the best of lights, considering that this is also the same game that has a transphobic slur in it, just doesn't come across as particularly thoughtful. I don't know, to me, in my heart of hearts, I think she's an ally. That makes me feel good, if you'll permit it, but as written, yeah, she's pretty messy. Shuichi Saihara, good for what you are. I really like Saihara as a main character. I think the way he ties into the overall themes of the game is really cool. Sure, I've seen a lot of people say that, oh, his man pain, but I don't think that's entirely fair, because his experiences spurred on by the words that Kaede says to him are very narratively important, and do tie into the themes of the game pretty heavily. I like that he's a way less snarky main character. I don't think that those are problems with the other main characters, but I think that it's something nice that sets him apart. He's a lot more empathetic. He's a lot softer around the edges. He doesn't have as much of a stomach for this stuff. He cries a lot. And far from being a complaint from me, that's honestly a positive. He's much more in tune with this stuff. I really like that Saihara actually feels like he gives a fuck about what's happening around him. He really cares about these people, and he really hates to bring the truth to light. It's a sticking point of his character, and it plays beautifully into the theme about what your personal truth is. I just really like him. Sue me. Miyu Iruma. All right, getting down to the last two. One of these is gonna be way easier than the other. Miyu Iruma, I'm gonna have to say, it's complicated. She's got the Teru Teru jokes. Honestly, she's just as bad as Teru Teru in a lot of ways. And no, this isn't me ranking her higher because she's a girl. It's me ranking her higher because I think she actually has more of an effect on the plot. But Teru Teru only really has story relevance to the first chapter, and he doesn't really contribute a whole lot to the larger story. At least Iruma, like,
does stuff.
Her neuroses do come from somewhere, even if it doesn't really, excuse her behavior. Also, she's part of one of the most compelling murder plans in the entire game, and the fact that she herself was trying to use the Neo World program to do something herself, and then had it turned back around on her, is really cool. So I guess what I mean to say is that Iruma is enough of a part of the story in interesting ways that I can't in good faith say that I think she's a waste. I do like her in some ways, I do really not like her in some other ways, but that's just how it is. And lastly, we have, why is this last? Shinguji's sister Tulpa, right at the bottom of Y. Seriously, this didn't need to be a thing. Between the making light of abuse and transmisogyny, can't say that I like it. Well, that feels like a depressing note to go out on. Oh, the cat is here. Do you want to say hello? Overall, this took me way too long to record, so I think that will show you that I indeed have a lot of opinions about this series. It may kind of sound like I give it a lot of flack, but as I hopefully established back in those videos too, I really do like Danganronpa. Some of the fans make it absolutely insufferable to engage with, which is why I haven't really talked about it in a long time, but I still have fond memories associated with it, and hopefully this character tier list was interesting to watch. Thank you for watching, stick around for the credit roll, and thank you again to Tribe9 for sponsoring this video. Alright, catch you later. Peace. Hi there, hope you enjoyed the video. Get it? That was a Danganronpa reference. Funny, right? I've been meaning to do something like this for a while, just thought it might be nice to revisit my opinions on some of these characters and do a little return to this franchise in the process since I haven't talked about it in a while. Maybe I'll get around to doing that Danganronpa 0 video sometime, but we'll see. I've got a big pile to go through that never seems to shrink. Still, if you enjoyed this, I'd love it if you could leave a like and a comment. Maybe tell me which characters you'd put higher or lower on your personal tier lists and why. I think that'd be pretty interesting. If you arrived here out of the blue too, you could go back and watch my older Danganronpa videos. They're multi-hour retrospectives on most entries in the series, so you've got no shortage of despair to stock up on. You could also watch some of my more recent stuff too. I did similar retrospectives on the first 4 Ace Attorney games. I did some more game essays in the past year as well, but YouTube hasn't really pushed them out to my viewers lately, so, appreciate the help. I'm also doing plenty of other stuff. I stream twice weekly. I've been streaming my blind reactions to Ace Attorney 5 since I've never played it before. I'm gonna be in a cartoon this year. Fellow YouTube friend and generally cool person Izzy's is making a pilot called Wastelandia, which I voice a cute bunny girl in. Super excited for that to drop sometime hopefully this year. Yeah, the world keeps spinning, perhaps too quickly sometimes, but you take what you can get. But mine would spin a little less without the support of my lovely patrons, who I'd like to thank now, including Cyberlink420, Serena Midori, ShogunDX, Friend of Dracula, Ali Oliver, Claire Meeboon, Bailey, Noelle Hadley, Joseph Adams, Weecon, MJL, Lord Omega 12, White Toast, Lay Fam, T, Saxon, 16 Crows in a Trenchcoat, Cass Reed, Indigo, Horsefry, CJ the Magic Goose, Niche Fish, JS, Phantom Falcon, Sad Boy Alert, Space Battery, Moiba Alsue, Big Yellow, Digimaniac 33, Sable Cowl, D-Bear, Elaine Alfelt, Sidra Hitching, Queen Elzyme, Waterbrat, Deviant Witch, Zero Enderborn, Bank Pads, Clovercool, Noah, Me Substitution, Everett Neely, Luna, Jane Yarley, Matt Hop, Jeff Ladd, Torterra454, Seditious, JunePop45, and Jordan Finch. Thank you again so much for watching. Thank you to Tribe9 and Akatsuki Games. Thank you to Kichu for the adorable art of me for the thumbnail, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye, Inara!